Before the release of Injustice 2, I made sure that I did a top 10 super moves video, because I think it was actually a top 5, because I saw all of the super moves before the release of the game. Of course we all did, or at least most of us did, and they were amazing. I had to put them in a list. But now that all the DLC is out, I'm curious to see how much my opinions changed about that. Now, this is in no particular order. I'm going to go through my favorite super moves in the game, and remember, this all comes down to personal opinion. I do want to go ahead and briefly mention an honorable mention, being TMNT, who did not make it onto this list, who I thought their super move was awesome, but could not be added to this list because, well, all of these super moves are just better. Another quick honorable mention is kind of the more militaristic style characters, the characters without superpowers, who were very limited in what they could do with the super move just because of what character they are. For example, Deadshot. A lot of people criticize his super move, but my answer is, what else do you really want him to do? It's actually pretty cool considering how limited that character is, and I could say the same thing for Wonder Woman, although I will say that Wonder Woman seems a little uninspired. You could incorporate more stuff into that, like, for example, more of the Amazonians could come and help her the same way they did in Injustice 1, but in a big different way. Regardless, let's jump straight into my list of top 10 super moves in Injustice 2. Starting off the list with Captain Cold. Captain Cold was one of my most anticipated characters for Injustice 2 because I love the Flash's Rogues Gallery, and Captain Cold is a big part of that. He's such an awesome character, and I'd be genuinely disappointed to not see him return in a future Injustice game because he is so freaking cool. Pun intended. But regarding his super move, it was so well done, and whilst it doesn't really necessarily make a whole lot of sense how he's somehow maneuvering around like that, we're talking about a video game with a bunch of superheroes in it, so I'm able to ignore it for the awesome effect that is this super move. For his own premier skin inbound. Next up is Green Lantern, and the main reason he's on this list is because of how different you can make this super move look. For example, depending on which shader you're wearing, you get an entirely different mech suit, which I think is just awesome. And I like the whole idea of him building a mech suit, because it doesn't really make sense from Green Lantern's perspective. If you're able to construct everything, why bother constructing this entire mech suit to make these rocket launchers that can shoot at your opponent when you could just make the rockets instead of this entire mech suit? Regardless, I think it looks pretty freaking cool, and it looks amazing when you can start adjusting those colors, whether you're a Red Lantern, a Green Lantern, or whatever. Next up is a guest character, Hellboy. What an awesome super move this was. Genuinely one of the more entertaining super moves on the roster, at least in my opinion. Some people might think it's a little bit basic, but I think its simplicity is what works for it. Anything more crazy than this, and it would kind of distract from the character himself, at least in my opinion. It's also really brutal, just Hellboy punching him in the face as they fall down into the pits of hell. Just some really cool imagery. Big fan of this one indeed. Hailing from Apocalypse, next up we've got Darkseid. I think one of the big reasons I'm a little bit biased about this one is just the startup animation for it. It's so cool that you can adjust the Omega Beam and turn it whichever way you want to, but even if it wasn't for that, it's a pretty awesome animation, and just seeing that massive Darkseid hand in space is just awesome. I think it really shows off just how powerful Darkseid is, or at least as much as they could in a quick little super move. We've got a big red monster up next, and no, I'm not talking about Kane the Wrestler, I'm talking about Atrocitus. And gosh, his super move is awesome. I know it's been a while since we first saw it. It was literally one of the first super moves in the game that we saw, so it might be a little bit difficult to remember just how awesome this one was the first time you saw it. But wasn't it awesome? He's doing the whole Red Lantern speech throughout the entirety of the super move, which I think is just amazing. I know a lot of people maybe won't agree with me on that one, but I just think it's so good. You can't not include it. It's so awesome. It also tells you so much about the character, even if you know nothing about Atrocitus. If you see this super move, you know, he's probably a villain, he's probably a very angry person, and he's kinda like Green Lantern. That's what you come away with if you've never seen the Atrocitus character before, and that's all you really need to know going into Injustice 2, so I think that's perfect. Next up is the Flash. Obviously, the Flash had to make it onto this list. Remember, this isn't in any particular order, but if it was, I think the Flash might be number 1 or maybe even number 2. It's just such a good super move. It incorporates his ability to time travel, which is nice. You actually get to see 2 different versions of the Flash on screen. You get to see a big T-Rex. I will say I would have appreciated them to, instead of him running onto that dock that's kind of in the middle of nowhere and he slams them into a statue, I would have much preferred him to have run to like the Flash Museum or something and like slam him into a sign and then run back in time to the T-Rex and then hit him with the T-Rex and then run back to the actual stage. I think that would have been a little bit more cool just to get a little Flash reference in there with the Flash Museum, but at the end of the day it doesn't really matter too much, and I'm happy to see what they did with the Flash's super, although it's going to be really hard for them to top in Injustice 3. Dr. Fate was one of the more anticipated characters for me me going into Injustice 2 because I really was hoping he was going to be a part of the main roster, and it's a bit of a shame I didn't spend more time on the character because I do like him quite a lot. But when they first revealed his super move, I was so impressed. I think it looks really good. I heard a lot of people complaining about it, and I'm not quite sure why. I think it's really good. In fact, that entire reveal trailer, I would go so far as to say Dr. Fate's entire character is designed so well and so perfect for what Dr. Fate should be that I don't have any complaints about Dr. Fate at all. The only reason I didn't play him as much, because in all honesty, I intended to do a lot of Injustice 2 Online content on my channel, which I don't really do. People don't like to watch zoning characters generally, so I never really took the character too seriously, which is a shame because, again, I think if I wasn't doing YouTube, Dr. Fate probably would have ended up being my main character because I love his animations and his entire moveset just comes together really nicely and he was just so well designed that I really wish I got to play him more. Next up is Scarecrow. Scarecrow, of course, had to make it onto this list. His super is just so Scarecrow. The startup for it makes perfect sense. What it looks like is happening for the opponent is that he's kind of tearing into the fabric of the universe, but that's not really what's happening. What's happening is he's, or at least theoretically, he's hitting them with more fear toxins, so he's able to go super giant and take them to this graveyard. And I also like the graveyard name changes depending, or not the graveyard name, but the headstone changes depending on who you're using the super move on, and I just think that's a really nice touch, and overall I would say that Scarecrow definitely deserves a spot on this list. Next up is technically two different characters. I'm gonna put Raiden and, of course, Black Lightning in this slot. These characters absolutely deserve to be here. Obviously, people freaked out when they first saw Raiden's super move because it is one of the best in the entire game, and then people freaked out even more when they found out that, of course, Black Lightning technically has a different one. The icon in the background when Raiden is using the super is, in fact, his Mortal Kombat logo. Or not his Mortal Kombat logo, but the Mortal Kombat logo, which is, of course, awesome for Mortal Kombat fans, but obviously those of us who were excited to play Black Lightning were a little bit disappointed because we were a bit confused about why you would do that. Black Lightning isn't going to do that same thing for sure, right? Well, he does do the same thing, but instead of that icon in the background, you now get the big fist, which is, of course, a really nice touch. I'm glad NetherRealm were able to pay that much attention to this super because there's a ton of people out there who would have been really upset if it was the Mortal Kombat logo. And finally, the last character on this list is Enchantress. I think she has one of the best supers in the game, even though it's kind of basic. She doesn't do anything super crazy, but I think the reason I like it so much is how different it is depending on the character you're using it. You know, if you use Gorilla Grodd, it looks significantly different, and just the idea of beating up your opponent with himself is just pretty cool. Pretty impressed indeed with this one, and a surprising amount of DLC characters made it onto this list. We got 3 DLC characters, 4 if you include Darkseid, but I don't really include Darkseid because he was there at the launch of the game, and this list is probably slightly different than it would have been at the launch of the game anyway because my opinions have changed on certain super moves. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or leaving a like on the video is always appreciated because it helps other people find it. Subscribe to keep up to date with future content. If you already are subscribed and you've been missing videos in your sub box recently, make sure you hit that little bell icon. It really does help keep up to date with content because it will notify you in the top right hand corner whenever I post a video rather than go into your sub box, which sometimes if you haven't been watching a lot of Injustice content, my videos won't go to your sub box. So hitting that bell is a great way to make sure you don't miss a video. My name is Bilbsy and I will see you in tomorrow's video.